by the project that Maya was working on, when she talked about AI metaphors. Because I haven't really thought about it that way before. The fact that we kind of take for granted certain metaphors that are presented to us by the sources of power when it comes to technology and culture. So we all have these metaphors that are coming from the West in general, from the US most specifically, and from Silicon Valley very specifically, and then from Hollywood as well. Um, and I was wondering if when Maya was asking me about Israel in this context, um, I automatically just told her, Israel is pretty Western. Probably all of our metaphors are just like copies from the US, because it's not only Western, it's Americanized, right? And then I gave it some more thought, and I realized that actually there are some quite interesting cases when it comes to the way we talk about AI, or we think about AI, when we, in some cases, don't even think about it as AI. And three examples came to mind, and I shared them with Maya, and it was a fun conversation that I'll be sharing with you now. So it's really kind of random thoughts that have been presented in slides. So really feel free to interject and or to just wait for after I present it to really pick it apart, because I think it's kind of suggestions for how we frame this idea of this artificial intelligence. So because I'm talking about examples coming from the Israeli culture, I will need to start with speaking a bit about Israel. So Israel is this place in the center here. And a couple of things about it. It's founded 1948, so it's pretty, still pretty new. Population 9.5 million. Culturally, it's mostly secular Jews, but the culture itself is becoming more conservative and traditional. Politically, originally, it was a socialist country, and the politics was very left-leaning. Nowadays, it's very much leaning to the right, as you probably know at this point. Minorities, so 20% of the citizens are Arab, and additionally, there are 5 million Palestinians with no political rights. So that's beyond the 9.5 million citizens. So this is in numbers. And Israel, despite all of that, despite the fact that we're in the middle of the Middle East, Israel identifies as Western. As you know, we are in the Eurovision. So of course, we are part of Europe. So now you know some background about Israel, but there's also this. So Israel has a very vibrant tech industry. Some call it the Silicon Wadi, and it's mostly located around Tel Aviv. 9% of the Israeli tech workforce is in the tech industry. That's like a world record. There's no other country in the world where such a high percentage work in tech. And out of all of Israel's export, 50% is tech export. So that's another thing that is pretty unique to Israel. The demographics of the tech world is 64% non-Orthodox Jewish men. So all of this tech industry prosperity is definitely not equally distributed. 31% are non-Orthodox Jewish women, only 3% Orthodox Jews, both men and women, and only 2% Arabs. So compare that to the distribution in the population. So there's definitely a lot of work doing about in that context. And of course, the military tech complex is a huge part of it. There's 18-year-old soldiers serve in elite tech units. The knowledge, the experience, and the connections they gather becomes an advantage towards the job market, and that's a part of why you see so much of that demographic leaning towards men, Jewish, specifically Jewish men, and non-Orthodox. So the Orthodox don't, and the Arabs don't serve in the army, and the women serving the army less than men, and specifically less in these units. So the military definitely forms a lot of this skew towards non-Orthodox Jewish men, and also creates certain perspective to the kind of tech that Israel is strong at. So it's things that have to do that the army is interested in. It's data, it's analytics, it's prediction, it's geography. So it's surveillance, it's and cyber. So definitely a lot of adversarial perspectives to technology. An attempt to predict, to investigate, and a lot of behavioral elements, and also an interesting and kind of unique interest in the urban environment in a very in a very interesting kind of mix of surveillance that starts with surveillance of Palestinian cities for security reasons, and then transforms into businesses that are looking at urban urban environments through capitalist surveillance or surveillance capitalism. So we can see kind of the connection here as the background for what type of tech Israelis often go to, or what kind of experience they bring from their military experience and into the market. So I'm going to talk about 3 examples. The first one we'll call Recalculating Route. The second one is the Shabbos Goy. And the third one is titled Now They Call Us Bots. So let's start with the first one. And the first one is starting with the darling of the Israeli tech culture, or the tech world, Waze. So Waze, the car navigation app, was founded in 2006, sold to Google in 2013 for around $1 billion. It is the poster child for the Israeli startup scene, very, very popular in Israel from the get-go. I got the opportunity to get some insider information here because I worked as a consultant for Waze for 2 years between 2012 to 2014. So it was sold to Google when I was there. But I was a consultant, so I didn't see a single dollar. So, and that's why I'm speaking here to you today instead of living on my yacht somewhere, which is not really what the rest are doing, but just saying. So Waze, one of the things that is kind of unique about Waze was the way it formulated the relationship with its with the drivers. It's always kind of the tagline was outsmarting traffic together, which I think is a very unique and kind of smart way of framing the experience of being alone on the road. There was something about how we are a part of a network of drivers that was always, I'm alone on in the car, and my experience against the other drivers is pretty adversarial. I'm just like trying to get there faster than anybody else. And there was something about the framing that we can help each other, which is kind of, it's a nice thought. And the fact that it kind of lowered some of the uncertainty around when the hell am I going to get to work or home, especially in Israel where traffic is horrible. That created kind of a surprising experience. And I think the design was part of it. And a lot of the approach was also not, unlike many other maps in general and prediction algorithms in other contexts, it was less about now we'll tell you to do this, and more about kind of a fun conversation with a lot of references to pop culture. So, for example,
I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle. Just kidding. Let's hit the road. I'm the Terminator Cyberdyne System Model 101, and you're coming with me. I'm looking for Sarah Connor. But we can go to your destination first. I know where you're going, and I will get you there. Trust me.
this is the Terminator as the narrator for the Waze navigation, and you could also customize the voice yourself. You could record your children that would say turn left or turn right. We're arriving at the destination and everything. In Israel, like pop figures were doing voices. The president was recorded voices. It was a thing, and then the relationship between me, the driver, and that algorithm that is basically speaking through the voice of the default voice of the woman or the man or my child or some pop singer or the Terminator or the president. It's anyone, but it's not a robot. So out of all of the options, it's not going to be the robot, and the drivers are not thinking about that algorithm as a robot. It's always he or she or they. It's never it. It's never a robot, and I think that's meaningful, and kind of surprising in many cases, because there's no expectations that we're going to start speaking to Schwarzenegger, or it's clear that it's a very limited set of text, that it's computer generated, that it's based on some technological thing that is happening somewhere, but it's delivered to me through this kind of a wink of conversation. So let's talk a bit about what happens on the road. So one of the challenges that we had with the maps for Waze, and a challenge that Waze still had, is that it's basically a pretty complicated network challenge. why am I talking about networks when we're talking about maps? Because basically a street map is a network, and a navigation problem is a network a network problem. Now, the map, if I need to get to that point, for example, we all, like, if we only look at the map, it's pretty clear how we're going to get there in the fastest way, right? But for some reason, Waze takes me that way. And here we get to the point that in the last couple of years we started talking about as explainable AI, right? Like, how am I going to explain to a driver why they're not going to take the road that they want? So the easiest way is to just say, okay, look, there's, like, we mark the road that you expect it to go through, and there's a lot of traffic there, so that's why we routed you differently. So we can't just communicate the path. We also need to communicate the why. So let's try again, because sometimes the traffic can be light, it can be medium, it can be heavy, and it can be a complete standstill. And at this point, we know what's going on that path, so we know how we're going to get there, right? But now Waze is taking us that way. Why is that happening? And this is definitely not explained by the map. Well, apparently the traffic is heavy for those turning left. It's completely free for those turning right. And at some point you get to a certain glass ceiling when it gets to where do you, like, how do you communicate these issues? How explainable can AI be when you don't really want your driver's eyes on the app? You want them on the road. You basically want them to look at the screen as little as possible. And it gets more complicated with one-way roads, forbidden turns, express lanes, U-turns, and so on. Another case that is important to understand kind of this challenge between what we understand from the map and what we see in the street, what we see on the map, and what the algorithm sees, can be explained maybe through this story with 42nd Street in Manhattan. So 42nd Street is a very central location. It's a path that connects Grand Central, Port Authority, Times Square. And people coming from the north and the south and the east and the west often choose to go through 42nd Street, which makes 42nd Street pretty stuck. And then every city has this path, right? But the interesting thing is that in 1990, the whole street was blocked for Earth Day, and the police was preparing itself for major traffic jams. The huge surprise was that, so they blocked the whole street, but the huge surprise is not only were there no traffic jams, traffic was actually better than it usually is, because the drivers chose alternative roads, which was actually more efficient. And network theory calls this the brass paradox. And the brass paradox basically says that removing a link from a network would not necessarily create a less efficient flow. In some cases, it would even create a better flow, and vice versa. And Waze actually knows that, and the Waze algorithm accounts for that. So in many cases, if we are drivers that are trying to get from one point to the other, some of them, if Waze routes everyone to the path that is currently the fastest, it's not going to stay the fastest. So Waze need to predict the traffic jam and to direct some of the drivers to paths that Waze knows that is going to be slower. So that it has to distribute drivers to slightly longer roads. And the ETA, the estimated time of arrival equation, is something that, you know, this is an attempt to explain what's going on under the hood. It's obviously very, very complicated. It's not something that would be able to be communicated in real time all the time on the screen. So there is this, like, this brings us to the point where when this happens, it's like, oh, how did that happen? What did they know? What changed, right? A lot of things can change. And there's this gap of knowledge that, you know, this gap of knowledge is the reason we use this app in the first place. But because we know that sometimes it does stuff behind the scenes, it creates this attention. And I accidentally recorded that tension just like a couple of days ago. I was like, you know, let's just hit record on Waze and see when would I get an opportunity to see this happening. It happened immediately. So let's see that. הופה, 28.
מה יש לווייז הזה לפעמים?
So I was Waze wanted me to take a right and then to drop in the other exit and then come back. It didn't make any sense. And I decided to disobey it and continue forward. And let's take it step by step. So first, there's doubt. Why is it asking me to take a right when it's obviously going to send me back left later? I'm going to take my chance. I'm going to disobey the algorithm. And then there's this moment when there's this kind of, it's not actually realizing that that I'm not going its way. And it does that, like, you know, Waze is already getting the data that I'm not on the path, but it might be a disturbance or anything. There's a certain moment then that I'm off the road and they don't know it. That's how it looks, right? And then there's the drama. Like, when are they going to realize that I'm not going to take the right turn? And beyond that, what is going to be my new ETA? And that's so currently the ETA is 1830, and the ETA now has become 1828. Yes, catharsis. I have beat the machine, right? Or them, right? So there could have been three options here. The first option would have been, like, let's say 1832, and then I would have been punished with an ETA that is 2 minutes too long, and like, oh, I guess they know better than I do, and like, I probably shouldn't be so disobedient the next time. Or it could have been exactly the same ETA, and then I knew it. You know, I know I can make my own decisions. I don't, like, they wanted me to do this. Like, I'm happy that I made my own decision. It doesn't matter anyway. But then what actually happened was 1828, and then you could hear my wife Galia saying, what is it with Waze sometime? What is it with them? They're tricking me. They're like, there's like this adversarial relationship. And I think there's something pretty unique about the fact that we can have this conversation, like that we're having a conversation negotiating the authority of who's driving the car. So it's even if I'm driving alone, I'm having a conversation. Waze is saying something in the form of a path and an ETA. I'm disobeying and doing something else, and Waze responds immediately. And this is something that happens specifically in this routing interaction, and it doesn't happen in many other places. So the prediction is, in a way, is a suggestion that I can disobey in every moment, and I can scrutinize it immediately, right? And it's in a way it's non-deterministic. It's like if you would go that way, we think it would be that way, but then you can always try us, and it's not like this is the only way you can go. And there's this power dynamics between us and the algorithm. This initial doubt creates a dynamic that leads us to this form of conversation. And when there's another person in the car, like in the case that I showed, from a conversation between two entities, it becomes a conversation between three, and then there are basically three conversations. I might say, and this happens a lot, I might say, Waze says I should continue straight or take a right, should probably take a right. My wife would usually be saying, no, what's wrong with them? Don't do it. And then like she's angry at them, and then she's angry at me for agreeing with them. So it's like three relationships in the car where it's only me and my wife, right? So group dynamics with the algorithm, and this this moment of the rerouting, for years now, it's a very minor element as far as the interface is involved. But back quite a few years ago, it would show this screen with a loader that would say recalculating route. In Hebrew, mechashev maslul mechadash. And this terminology, recalculating route, has become a cultural trope that you could see everywhere. You could see, like, I just found like 4 books that are called Recalculating Route, like all of them. One of them is, for taking hikes. The other one is self-help. Another one is another self-help, and the third one is a political kind of political theory, or religious and politics. So these are books. Now there's like this is a video clip for a song. These are 2 TV series and countless political memes, right? So it's all like recalculating route is this moment of introspection, because what is happening? There's new information. The new information might be coming from the data, but it can happen from the driver themselves, and this demand from the algorithm to recalculate the route is something that I think I personally really like, and I think we need more in more kind of interactions with algorithms. There's obviously more to say about that, which is why we'll say that in the conversation. But let's go on to the next example. And the next example is the Shabbos Goy. I'll start with a family story. When I was, I think I was around 10 years old, the age of my son now, we had a rare visit from my religious grandparents for Sabbath. Now, they wouldn't visit us for Sabbath because we're not religious, and it was always tension, bringing up the fact that my mom became secular and so on. But they stayed with us for the Sabbath, and that was, I think it only happened once, only then. And I am, I'm going to the bathroom. The Sabbath starts, and as you know, probably no work is allowed to happen during the Sabbath. No cooking, no fire, no electricity. And I go to the bathroom, and when I come out of the bathroom, I do what I always do when I come out of the bathroom, which right after washing my hands, that's not my point, closing the light. I close the light, but I shouldn't have closed the light, because if I close the light, we can't open the light and we can't use the bathroom, and we won't be able to use the bathroom for the whole weekend. And what are we going to do now? And I said, so I'll just turn on the light. No, don't turn on the light. Why can't I turn on the light? Because then you'll be sinning. Well, I'm sinning all the time. Like I'm not religious. No, you can't turn on the lights when we're here because you're Jewish. And then it was like, what are we going to do now? This is horrible. My parents were so stressed because they, they waited for this for so long. I apparently didn't get the memo about the lights. And then the solution came. The neighbor is married to a Dutch guy who happens to be non-religious. And there is an option to ask the Dutch guy to come and turn on the light for us as a Shabbos Goy. The Shabbos Goy is apparently something that came from like when Jews lived in non-Jewish communities.
He was non-Jewish, not religious. Non-Jewish.
Non-Jewish. And then, thank you, Uri. And when Jews lived outside of in environments that were not Jewish, they would sometimes, when they need, ask a non-Jew to come and do something that Jews are not allowed to do. And they wouldn't be sinning that goy, because that goy is like, where do you even start? Like your souls are like doomed already. I'm sorry. So it's too late. So I found another reference to that, like a very short clip from a short film that I'll just show you.
I honestly don't know how I can help you.
So you need me to turn off whatever's in here?
If you want to. I can't ask you to, but if you chose to, yes, please.
You get the point. So Shabbos Goy. Now the Shabbos Goy used to be a human being, not much of a human being as I mentioned, but a human being. But more and more you got technology taking the role of the Shabbos Goy, and kind of the simpler examples are the Shabbos clock, which just turns on and off whatever it's connected to based on the clock. So tricking God, number one. Another very essential technology for Shabbos is the Shabbos lift. Because buildings have become very, very tall, and you can't just walk to the 25th floor on a Shabbos when you're coming back from synagogue. So there's the Shabbos lift. And how does the Shabbos lift work? It actually stops in every floor. It's the most irritating thing in the world, but gets the job done. And now we're getting to the murky area of accessibility. So can you drive like a vehicle for disabled if it's electricity based? There are those who say yes, there are those who say no. Can you use your hearing aid? Those who say yes, those who say no. And the biggest, in Israel specifically, one of the biggest tensions around the Shabbos is public transportation. So there is no public transportation in Israel in Shabbos for the same reason that I am not allowed to turn on the light after I turned it off. Because if the country would be supporting public transportation, Jews would be involved in sinning on Sabbath. And that is really one of the biggest, there are a lot of arguments in Israel. This is still one of the biggest ones. And it's kind of something that has been around since the founding of the country. Now, what about AI? So now there is a lot of discussion that self-driving cars might be the way to get out of the problem of the status quo. It's called the status quo. That was the status quo between mainly Orthodox and seculars. And if you're allowed to go on the lift, you might be able to go on the self-driving bus, and that's a very interesting way of looking at this technology, because all of a sudden this technology, one of the affordances of self-driving cars is the fact that it doesn't have a soul, right? Like it doesn't sin, and think about that when you're thinking about AI. So I'll get to the third example, and then we'll talk. And this one is a slightly more political one, but I think it's fascinating. So I don't know if you know, but we had 4 elections in 2 years and counting. Netanyahu really likes to be prime minister. And some people really like Netanyahu as a prime minister, and we have a very complex political system that gets him to keep his seat for some reason for a very long time. It might change, but we've been saying that it might change for a very long time now. But the public discourse is very divisive. There's polarization and violence, and on social media specifically, like it's as polarized as can be, and a lot of the debate, like in every place, goes online. And 2 years ago, there was basically a lot of Netanyahu supporters have been expressing, or accounts affiliated with the Likud have been supporting Netanyahu quite ferociously and quite violently in a lot of cases. And then in April 1st, 2019, 1 week before the elections, this so-called the Big Bot project was published. This was 2 independent civic hackers that tracked accounts mainly on Twitter and found a coordinated Twitter network of fake accounts promoting Netanyahu. And this was a big story. It broke out in the biggest newspaper in Israel and in the biggest newspaper in the world, and in the New York Times at the same time. It was like a week before the election. It was like this was going to be everything that the election is going to be about. I'll show you a short clip in English that would tell the story.
It feels almost like deja vu in Israel Tuesday morning, as just a week ahead of national elections, a new report is now alleging that a network of hundreds of fake Twitter accounts attempting to influence the vote has been discovered. And the newly published findings go on to point the finger at the Likud party and Prime Minister Netanyahu. This, as the network has also been promoting Netanyahu while criticizing his opposition. In fact, the network's activity in past months had even supposedly spiked in 2 very curious moments. First, in February, when Attorney General Mandelblit announced intentions to indict Netanyahu on corruption charges pending a hearing, charges that the Prime Minister firmly denies. And the second time was just after Benny Gantz and his partners launched the Blue and White Party. Still, all that said, no direct connection has been found linking Netanyahu or the Likud to this network. And further, Netanyahu fired back against the report, calling it a focused attempt against him by a left-leaning research center. He also laughed off the idea of how the left supposedly can't accept that people would actually support him. And the Likud likewise released a campaign video that made light of the allegations outright. But regardless of Netanyahu's deniability, the evidence linking his interests to those of the network is also compelling. And over 154 accounts were already identified as using false names, while over 400 accounts and counting are suspected of being fake, all appearing in coordination, sharing each other's posts, and slowly increasing activity over time. Additionally, the research group denied any partisanship in its findings, saying it was only concerned with rooting out manipulations online. And in response to the report, Netanyahu's rival, Benny Gantz, leader of the Blue and White Party, called for an independent investigation to be launched.
So apparently, the research and the fact that it's going to explode on the New York Times and on Yediot Ahronot, the biggest newspaper in Israel, was leaked. It was leaked to the Netanyahu campaign, and they were as ready as you can imagine. They were ready with a press conference with one of the alleged bots. So one of the accounts that seemed like a bot network, or one of like a few of the accounts that were mentioned are actually operated by actual humans that are actually supporting the Likud party. One of them in this picture is called the account of so-called Captain George. Captain George is a very nasty social media user, but he is not a bot. And Netanyahu made his day, his month, and his year by inviting him to be the face of the bot network. And I think I translated the parts of the press conference that Netanyahu gave, and I want you to follow it because it's brilliant. So let's check. Let's see what my prime minister has to say.
כי אתם, אזרחי ישראל, אתם לא בוטים. מיליון מצביעי הליכוד הם לא בוטים. אתם רואים מה שאני וחבריי בליכוד עושים למען המדינה שלנו. אתם רואים את ההישגים העצומים שלנו. אתם רואים שלפיד וגנץ הם חלשים, לא מתאימים, ולא יכולים להיות ראשי ממשלה, ושהדרך שלהם שגויה. התקשורת אזרחי ישראל משקרת לכם מבוקר עד ערב. ברדיו, בטלוויזיה, בעיתונים. הם משתיקים ומכפישים אנשי ימין. הם קראו לנו צ'חצ'חים, אספסוף, בבונים, מנשקי קמאות ומזוזות, ועכשיו הם קוראים לנו בוטים.
So now they call us bots. Now he actually mentioned, like, they used to call us chachchachim. Chachchachim is like it's a slur. It's kind of a racial slur, and there's a very famous speech by the first prime minister from the right, from the Likud, Begin. It's called the Chachchachim speech, where he speaks about the racism coming from the left against the Mizrahi Jews on the right. I won't get too much into it, but what Netanyahu is doing here is connecting the blame of you're subhuman, you're sub-citizens, you don't have a soul. You cannot. Bots becomes a racial slur. And I'm about to finish, but I want you to see the newspaper. It's called Israel Hayom. Netanyahu's, or Sheldon Adelson's newspaper for Netanyahu, a daily newspaper that is amplifying Netanyahu's voice. This was the title on the next morning. The big title is like, "Bless the Reviver of the Bots." And on the left, you see three opinions. One is, "I am a bot." The second is, "I am a bot," and the third is, "I am a bot." And the subheading goes, after the allegations, the bots step out of the shadows. We real living and breathing, and we write from the heart. If I only had a heart, right? So, to conclude, recalculating routes presents this option for rapid negotiation of prediction authority. The Shabbos Goy points at affordance of the non-spiritual agent. AI becomes a political racial slur when we see the examples of the bot network. All of these examples are about agency and authority in different ways. And I think that is one of them, it comes back in many metaphors around AI, around a lot of discussions around AI, but I think that there's something about these three examples that are very, very local and very, very based in culture. Even Waze as an international service is very much, this kind of interaction is very much kind of the argument around kind of the book. It's not the book now, it's the map. But then I think there's a lot here for us to chew on. So let's do that. And as I promised, this would probably be like 20 minutes. And obviously it took much, much more because I have a certain reputation to maintain. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mushon.
Thank you.
That was great. Just before sort of opening up for some discussion, I realized maybe I should have just said a little bit about the AI Metaverse project, because we were referring to that a lot, and that was the sort of starting point for this. So I did drop a link in earlier just to like a talk that I gave about it a couple of months ago. But this is basically a research project which is mostly complete, but I haven't published anything on it yet, and because I'm trying to finish this dissertation in the next few weeks, so I will write something about it. But basically what I did was, this was a fellowship project with a think tank and institute in Los Angeles called the Bagroon Institute. And what we tried to do there was come up with a regional catalog of AI metaphors, partly, as Mushon said, to sort of push back against some sort of dominant metaphors of AI, but also to actually just understand the different sort of imaginaries and futures of AI in different places, and to sort of disturb this idea of what we mean by AI in the first place, because these things are not homogenous, they're not culturally homogenous, they're not politically or even computationally sort of homogenous. We understand these things in different ways. So as part of that research project, this is how Mushon and I started talking, and I've actually interviewed, I think I've interviewed about like 25 people at this point, and did desk research with about 9 students. We worked in 13 students, 13 languages, 9 countries, in sort of collecting different metaphors. And again, I'm using the word metaphor very specifically, recognizing that analogy, narrative, trope, metaphor, these are words we often sort of collapse one into the other, but for people who are technical about these things, they mean very different things. What I was interested in doing was getting a sense of how metaphors allow us to negotiate things that we don't know. And this is the role of metaphors in science, in a lot of science, and a lot of fields in which we're dealing with uncertainty and dealing with things we don't know. We often use metaphors to shape that space and to convey what we mean. We use it in our everyday speech all the time without thinking about it. Just think of all of the animal metaphors, the 600-pound gorilla in the room, the white elephant, there's like water off a duck's back. These are just in English, but we use metaphors all the time. And I was interested in, how does this unknown space of what AI is, how is it being shaped by the metaphors? And what tends to happen with metaphors is we use them so much because they're so perfect and they just capture this unknownness and what we're trying to say, that they become like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The metaphor becomes the thing itself, and it just sort of inhabits that space almost entirely. So if AI becomes like, Terminator and Skynet and robots, a part of that is because this is how we imagine it. If you see the dehumanization of workers in Amazon's factories, yeah, there's a lot of political reasons for that and economic reasons for that, but also perhaps this is, the metaphor has taken over what we mean. So I think the point was to be intentional about metaphors and why we use them, and to say that this is a metaphor. Is this really AI? Or is this something else? What's going on here? So that was the point of the AI Metaphors project. And, and Israel was one of the countries I was looking at. And listening to you talk, Mushon, I'm like, no, we have to write like a whole thing just about this. I think we're going to do a case study on this. There is a longer piece that I want to write, sort of not comparatively, but looking at these different ways that AI metaphors work in different parts of the world. And I'm happy to go into that later. But let's now maybe just open up with specific questions for Mushon. Great talk, fabulous. I had like lots of questions, but I will let others go first. Thank you.
And feel free to, like, if you want, you don't have to, but if you want, feel free to open the camera. I see a couple of comments here on the chat. I won't call you out, but if you're interested in making them out loud, feel free. It's very intimate here, so don't be afraid.
Yes, we have a small round. So if you like to ask a question, you can use the chat or raise your hand. Let us know, and then speak to us with or without camera.
It can also be a comment, not a question.
Yeah.
Maya, you might need to get this rolling. Oh, yeah, there is one.
I think everyone is still digesting. Yeah,
Hi, thank you so much for this. I'm going to keep my camera off just because it's past 12 a.m. in Hong Kong and I look rubbish. But thank you so much. I found it super interesting, and your project as well. I was just hoping to ask about what these metaphors you really carefully laid out. How are they good for reorienting our perspectives, but also what they hide? Obviously, no metaphors are perfect. They reflect very different dimensions of our complicated realities. I found your Shabbos Goy, AI Shabbos Goy, super interesting. And obviously, there's a lot of people who've written about how AI doesn't remove friction from daily life, but merely displaces it off to other people. So for example, there's examples of how smart devices are being trained by real people in real time, even if it's hidden. So the labor is there, it's just not obviously visible. And of course, like, it could be sinful people or non-Jewish people working these smart systems, but it's really interesting to think about this kind of displacement in terms of the Shabbat. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts more on how you view these metaphors.
So I think there's something. I started with the Waze example first because I think it's the richest and the most relevant, or maybe actionable. Like, because I really think that one of the things that I'm really interested as, like, based on this conversation that really started with Maya just recently about this, to try to ask, when is a prediction algorithm allowing us to scrutinize it immediately? And when is the conversation, when is a prediction framed as a suggestion that can immediately be replaced by another prediction? I think there's also something very, like, one of the reasons that I really like the recalculating route trope in Israeli language is that it's based on change. It's based on, like, things like I was about to go that way, but I after introspection, I decided to go another way. And it's always used in the context of how to change your life, how to rethink what you thought before, and it's based on that moment where an algorithmic agent is doing this recalculation, sometimes because new data arrived, but mostly because we have said we don't want to go that way. And it's, if we're talking about metaphor, it's such a beautiful metaphor to say, I know that, like, if we use that term, like that horrible title for the book, What Technology Wants, then it's not about what technology wants, it's about what we want. And if we, like, I think we need to try to think, how can we create AI systems that allow us to immediately challenge the prediction. Yeah, Adam, you want to interject, please?
Not interject, I was just putting up for a following question. Sorry, carry on if you're carrying on.
It's like, I'm sorry, I'm Israeli, and I'm really not used to being so polite. I would like really feel free to just like jump in. But
yeah, I think Alexa's next in the queue, but
okay.
Yeah, Adam, if you have something.
Yes, but she hasn't.
No, Alexa first. Alexa first.
I'm sorry, but Alexa is definitely first, but she hasn't raised her question yet. So please, Adam, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess it was just regarding this whole thing of suggestion, and like when it comes to societies adopting, taking on suggestions and taking them forward, whether it comes to policy. Where do you think like different countries are in this? Like, it's a suggestion, oh, this is how to like form a city and stuff, or it could be something to do with how a government works or something. Do you see any kind of countries leading on that kind of example, taking on suggestions of AI?
Well, the framing, kind of the national framing for this about like three metaphors from Israeli culture. It's only because that's the question that Maya asked. So that I'm not trying to say something necessarily about Israeli culture. I do think that it's important to understand what is the culture these metaphors arrive from, and there are reasons that they happen in this culture, maybe, and maybe they happen in other cultures as well. I would say that while the metaphor of recalculating path is very, like, it's basically echoed in other fields, but I wouldn't say that Israel is leading in any way when it comes to digital rights or to kind of regulating algorithms, or even to, like, definitely not critical thinking about surveillance. And we have a lot, and as you know, we're exporting it. A substantial part of this 50% of the export is around surveillance. So metaphor, I'm interested in this conversation where we take this metaphor and say, let's think about it beyond just like the national context. And I actually think that it's I'm not saying much by saying the EU is taking much more of a leadership role when it comes to regulating technology than the US does. So definitely, definitely, I think there's room to we've been using metaphors from cultures that are not our own, right? The Terminator, and I use that as the voiceover because it's such a contrast. Like, nobody, like, thinking about it, the funny thing about the Terminator voiceover is the fact that it's so over the top, but it is, it's the metaphor of the metaphor. He is speaking as a robot. It is supposed to be a robot, but it's over the top because nobody thinks about your voice over your voice navigation commands as a robot, right? So I'm just saying, I think the opportunity that Maya created to say, let's start, sharing metaphors I think that's the opportunity here.
Can I just jump in there about this and then maybe go over to Alexa's point next? We wanted to do a regional cataloging, not so much to come up with a map of different words for robot in different countries or contexts, or to do like a literal sort of cartographic geographic map of AI, but actually to try and look at what were the similarities. Because the thing with media is also like media is very global. There's the Terminator exists in lots of places. Everybody knows that Skynet and all of these things. Everybody knows that Wakanda is a real place because we've all watched Black Panther. So
if they don't, they will know soon, right? When they
So I think the point was in the project, but also I think the question that I have for Mushon and generally this kind of work is like, what is the metaphor here? And that's what we were trying to do in the project, to say you can collect all of these different examples from different places. But when we did our analysis, we found that there are very few metaphors around AI currently. And some of them sort of overlap. So I would say that there's actually not more than 5 or 6. I'm not telling you what those are right now. I don't want to go into that right now, but I think that my sense is there are very few, and they keep kind of repeating in different ways. But anyway, I just wanted to say that about the regional and the country context thing. They're all actually not that different when you pare them down to what the metaphors are examples are actually saying.
So I think the metaphor, like the way I see metaphor is a bit is a bit. It's not necessarily like what kind of entity is the AI. Like, do we think of the AI as a god, as a devil, as a friend? It's not. That's not the metaphor that I think is interesting. I think it's more more like maybe McLuhan would look at this interaction. Like, if we have an affordance for conversation, or conversation is a loaded term. If we have an opportunity for challenging a prediction, no matter how sophisticated and scientific and authoritative it is, first of all, it becomes less authoritative in a good way. Like it becomes its role within our life is becoming something that I think is much more. It actually sheds away some of the metaphors, right? It creates an opportunity to just say, oh, you think it would be like that? I'm not sure about that, or I'm going to challenge it, and you're going to answer me immediately. It's not like even the weather. Like at this point, we all know that the weatherman lies or doesn't lie, but it cannot tell us the truth 100 times, because the weatherman predicts the future. They don't know the future. But if the weatherman says that that it's going to rain, I need to take the umbrella right now. Like, it's not like I'm going to not take the umbrella and then negotiate this. It's like I need to make a decision now, right? I need to decide now what I'm going to wear. It's either I trust or I don't trust, and it's not going to be in like, we would never think about it as a conversation because it's not in the time frame where conversation takes place. And that's why I do keep coming back to the term conversation, even though I think it's very limiting. There is something about the way information is exchanged in a dialogue mode that is happening in this interaction that I think needs to happen more. And the metaphor here is that affordance, right? Which is rare. I've started to think like, what kind of predictions allow us that? Like, dating apps, you should go on that date.
Mushon, we have 2 more questions. Should we go ahead?
I guess so.
Super. Can you see the chat? There's 2 more questions in the chat. First from Alexa and then from Jet. Shall I read them, or can everyone see it?
Yeah, please read them if it's okay.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Alexa. She was in waiting line for a while now. So Alexa writes, many thanks for this amazing talk and these new associations to AI that really triggered something. In the part about the navigation system, I noticed you referred to the navigation system with the pronoun they instead of she, he, or it, for example. I wondered if that is a common way to refer to these systems in Hebrew, or maybe you refer to them in terms of the people of the company.
I think it's a great question, actually, and it's because it really ties back to the point that I was trying to make about this fraternity thing. Like, somebody knows someone at Waze. Israel is small enough. It's somebody's son. It's somebody who served with someone in the army. Somebody knows, like, they are people. It's not like this, and it wasn't thought of as a corporation. And even today, when it's 7 years after it was sold to Google, like, people don't think of Waze as a part of Google. They don't think of and that's where it's a problem, right? They don't think about the fact that this data is shared with Google. They don't think about Waze as a corporation. It's still a startup, even though everybody knows it was sold 7 years ago. It was all around the 8 years ago. It was all around the media. It was like the story of the day. It was the cover of every newspaper. But then it's they. It's our, it's also kind of an Israeli success story. And there's something very naive about this thinking that it's they, it's our friends, it's us. Oh, the smart Israeli startup nation-y thingy. It's very PR'd, whether we like it or not. So yeah, it's I think it's very telling that it's often they.
I think that also refers to what Alexa wrote a few minutes later about saying, I love the notion of, quote, local metaphors based on the regional culture pushing back to the dominant metaphors. So I think that's a nice bridge. I'm going to read what Jet wrote, and then we can continue. So Jet wrote, this is a great and useful conversation. Plus, it's great to see you, Mushon, after almost 10 years.
It was great to see you, Jet, for a few moments here, there as well.
It feels that the task of explaining AI is often delegated to marking comms, even though the nuance and consequence of what we imagine is not just about sales, but civics. How can this deeper understanding mainstream into how products and governments plan and sell? Wow.
Well, that's a huge question, and it's great because we have another 5 hours to discuss it, as we should. It's very true. Like, there's such a disconnect between marketing speak and let's say even within the companies, between marketing departments and product department. Like, the product departments are the ones that are supposed to be creating the relationship with the user through the product itself. Like, that's the platform. Now, the marketing is everything around it, and the marketing is definitely trying to create something that would serve the organization, not something that would necessarily serve the civics. But one of the things that I was going crazy to really understand when I started working with Waze, why are people editing Waze maps? Why are you doing that? It's a commercial company. Like, there is this amazing project called OpenStreetMap. Why are you not taking all of the, people work for hours and hours and days and weeks and months and years to edit data for a company that is, it used to be a startup. It was then bought by Google. Everybody was sure that now it's going to end. They continue editing it. There is something so powerful about this attachment, and it's not. It's a set of happy accidents, and it's also and it's also, some smart decisions by some of my colleagues there, and at the end of the day, you have like this idea that people feel like they have ownership over the map. Like in some points, I was saying like, now that I've seen it from the inside, how can I take this back to OpenStreetMap where it belongs? Like, if this if this data of the map, and I haven't mentioned it, and it's important to understand, like, Waze started with an empty map. There was no map in the beginning. It was just drivers started to create data by the fact that they were driving. One of the reasons that Google bought Waze, even though it had Google Maps, is first of all to make sure that Facebook doesn't buy it, but also to buy the data. The data that Google didn't own the data for most of its map, it bought it. It allowed Google to create the data for Google Maps as actual Google Maps rather than an app that shows somebody else's data. So the whole marketing, coming back to the marketing, like, people were volunteering for something that they saw as a social good, as something that they're doing together, where there's another project that is actually doing that, which is called OpenStreetMap, the Wikipedia of the maps, and they were not doing it there. And I was like, how is it possible? It opens a whole other conversation about, open culture, open source communities, user experience, and then, which, let's have that conversation. We haven't talked for so long. So happy you're here.
That would be great.
Seems like you two should definitely connect again after 10 years. You have a lot to exchange, and it's quite nice. We could listen to this forever. There's one very interesting last question from Uri, and then we are going to slowly wrap up. So Uri is writing, regarding the Shabbos Goy, do you know of other spiritual or religious metaphors for AI systems or features from different cultures around the world?
Yeah, well, usually it's quite the other way around. We have Ray Kurzweil. The title of the book is, I think, if I remember correctly, The Age of Spiritual Machines, or something, something like that. Like a lot of the idea, the interest in AI is like, it is intelligence, but does it have a soul? And the soul, the idea of can we think of the machine as spiritual? And even everything around transhumanism is spiritual, basically. These are ideas about what is the soul. Can AI contain the soul? Maybe the soul itself is a set of zeros and ones. All of that is a huge, I wouldn't even call it a debate. It's kind of an aspiration within the myth of transhumanism. and it's very mythological, and it's very like it's really there's this amazing story which I'm forgetting what was the title. It was there was this meme that got completely out of hand, and maybe someone here would remember what was it called. But the thing was, someone was suggesting that someone on the internet was suggesting that the AI that is about the general AI, that mystical entity that is about to emerge from artificial intelligence in the near future is going to rule us all, and it's going to be our God basically. And now it's going to take it's also going to take its revenge on anyone who knew it was about to emerge and stood in its way. And as soon as you heard that meme, you can no longer ignore it, because basically, if you know that now that you've heard it, and I've basically sinned all of you now, because now that you know it, if you're not going to devote your life now to the AI until the end of time, the AI would take its revenge on you. And I think there are quite a few people in this room that are not like doing what they should be doing. The AI would take its revenge on you by planting your soul in an endless simulation of hate.
Okay, this sounds very much like The Ring, you know, the Japanese film The Ring. If you don't know it, definitely watch it. But no, I think that definitely sounds like, you know, classic internet that we inhabit now. Like, you know, there's something off Reddit. But I was going to say about it's not so much religiosity. I think there's definitely a spiritual angle to AI. But I think what's more important is how these actually speak to the place of the human in this, what we think is the relationship between the human and worlds that we can't inhabit, or ways of engaging with those worlds. So these other intelligences, it's not, I mean, of course, AI itself in the Western world is, I mean, Shabbos Goy is one, but the whole thing is a Christian enterprise, the whole entire thing. So I would say that's the most obvious sort of, you know, Christian, very messianic, and more broadly Judeo-Christian, but definitely Christian. And then I think in the other context is more like with the Chinese. I think some people are sort of talking about, especially people like Yu Kui will write about Taoist principles, but I think that's more about the relationship between us and our technologies. It's not so much AI. So he comes very much from a Heideggerian perspective. He draws on a lot of very traditional European philosophers, but I think what he's trying to do is to look at 14th, 15th century Chinese philosophers who talked about the place of the human in using technology to do things in the world. So I think there's there's some sort of animistic, but I think it's much more about like I read these less about, well, maybe I think of religion itself as it's about humans. It's not about God. So in that sense, you know, I think some of these ideas around AI are, much more about humans being, and therefore transhumanism, you know, is one of those examples of like the human transcending itself. And I think that was probably that very famous guy who made it popular, Travis Kalanick or something, was like one of those Silicon Valley tech entrepreneurs. Anyway, and yes, of course, as Oli says, there's the golem. The golem is very much a part of the early golem of Prague. Yeah.
And I think the political spin that Netanyahu created around the idea of the bots could not exist without this idea of the technological Shabbos Goy, or the idea, you know, the idea of the robot as the less than human, right? As the inferior, the always inferior. Those who don't have the soul or the political will, they're just like robots. you have to appreciate the craft. You can hate the man, but you have to appreciate the craft.
Yeah. I have to go. It's my turn I have to cook dinner. So yeah, I know, like, what's wrong with these men these days? But I want to say that, so from my side, I want to say that thank you so much, Mushon. This was great. And I'm sure that we will write about this together. I think we really should. But also that, if you think about ideas for the dictionary that you want to contribute, I will, like I said, I will put out a call again in May. But I think there are sort of pieces from this which would form quite nice little stories of 500 words each. And your presentations always are so rich and so textured and so layered. And I'm always really happy to hear you talk. So thank you so much for doing this. It's a real pleasure and honor to see you and to learn and to listen. And thank you, Tina, and for organizing everything. And thanks to everyone for coming. Yeah.
Yes, I also would like to say thank you to Maya for inviting to organize, and thank you to Mushon for this amazing input. I think it's gonna spin for the rest of the day. And thanks to everyone for the nice questions, and we will put it online so you can re-listen to it soon again. And have a nice evening, morning, midday, wherever you are. And
thank you, everyone.
take care. Please stay healthy.
Go to sleep now. Yeah.
Sorry, say it again.
No, I was just saying good night to Jung because it felt like it's very late in Hong Kong.
Yeah. Thanks, Mushon.
Ciao.
See you. Bye.